Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to NEWSROOM. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 4th of April 2024, and these are the stories that we'll be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin with day 181 of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And on the one hand, where in the United Nations Security Council request that was made by Russia in order to take a statement out on the attack on the Iranian consulate by Israel was vetoed. On the other hand, we also see that the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolution on ceasefire is also not being implemented by Israel, as the number of casualties keep on increasing as we speak. Also, the United States said that establishing an independent Palestinian state should not happen through direct negotiations between the parties and not at the United Nations. What does that bode as well as far as the Palestinian request to be part of the United Nations is concerned? And on the other hand, we all know about what happened to the charity organization and how the people belonging to different nationalities were targeted. There has been huge global condemnation as far as that is concerned, but is there some tangible action happening? That and more will be discussed in our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns climate change, where Pakistan, of course, we all know, has been grappling with the effects of climate change, the profound effects of which includes shifting and unpredictable weather patterns. We've seen the floods in 2022 that submerged 1/3 of our country way back, and still we are reeling under the effects economically. At least we've gone to the COP, we've asked many a times for the proper resources to be given to Pakistan. Unfortunately, those resources have not been properly sent or provided to Pakistan. On the other hand, the Indus River System Authority also said that the country is facing a 30% water shortage at the start of the sowing season for cash crops such as rice and cotton, the Kharif crop, that is. Will that have an impact on the crops? Also, we all know that there is a report that was taken out last year on Pakistan that might be subject to drought in the year 2025. Is Pakistan ready for that as well? Also, the vast majority of planet-warming carbon dioxide emissions since 2016 can be traced to a group of 57 fossil fuel and cement producers. Researchers have said this on Sunday. This is a new report that has come out, but will COP and other important organizations be able to do the needful? Also, tropical forest loss has declined last year, but other indicators show that the world's woodlands remain under tremendous pressure. This and more is going to be discussed in our second story. Then we are going to discuss the 45th death anniversary of former Pakistan People's Party leader Zulfiqaralibhutto Shaheed. He was also the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. In the message, our Prime Minister said that Zulfiqaralibhutto played a key role in promoting democracy and democratic traditions in Pakistan. He said it was due to the efforts of Zulfiqaralibhutto that the country adopted a unanimously agreed upon constitution in the year 1973. Finally, we are going to talk about a diabetes drug that is showing promise against the Parkinson's disease. We all know that Parkinson's is a devastating nervous system disorder that affects 10 million people worldwide with no current cure as we speak. Now, our drug to treat diabetes has slowed the progression of motor issues that are associated with the Parkinson's disease. This is a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Will that create any impact? We'll try to see that in this show as well. Let's begin with our first story, and that concerns day 181 of the Israel-Palestine war, genocide, ethnic cleansing, with the world slowly grappling with the effects of it all. Will there be a ceasefire? Will there be a stop to it? We've been joined by Jauhar Saleem Sahib. He's a former foreign secretary and currently the head of the IRS and NGO as well. Thank you very much to have joined us, Jauhar Saleem Sahib. Israel's military has halted leave for all combat units amid concerns of possible escalation of the killing of the Iranian generals in the Iranian consulate. Then also the Iranian Supreme Leader declared that Israel will be punished for the attack that killed members of the Revolutionary Guard, including 2 generals. How strong, in your point of view, is the risk of escalation of this conflict after this attack?
Yeah, I think this attack on the embassy, on the Iranian embassy in Damascus, it has, of course, evoked wide-scale condemnation from throughout the world capitals. Having stated that, the reaction has varied depending upon the capital. Russia, China, many other countries, they were unequivocal. Even European Union has issued a strong statement on that. But when the matter went to the UNSC, where it was taken to by Russia, we know what happened. In fact, in a program some days ago, there was a talk and an expert was saying that there might not be a resolution passed against Israel on this matter. I said, well, resolution is out of question, you know, what to talk of a resolution. I would be surprised to see even a joint statement coming from there.
So we have seen just now that the United Nations Security Council has even not taken out a statement. It has been vetoed by the US, Britain and France.
Exactly. And that is exactly what has happened. Now, in terms of the retaliatory action by the Iranians, as they have, you know, they mentioned in their statements, we have to recall what happened a few years ago when General Qasem Soleimani was killed in a similar fashion. He was even a higher rank of sort of, you know, within the Iranian armed forces. And it had evoked very strong reaction from Iran, and they had promised revenge. But what happened afterwards was that there was a retaliatory action. There were strikes, missile strikes on US installations in the region, but there were no casualties. It was just a loss of buildings, damage to the buildings. So presently as well, what I envisage is that at some point there might be a retaliation in kind, but that retaliation again would be very measured. Iran would not want to escalate this conflict, would not want to widen this conflict, and Iran would not want a direct confrontation with Israel. There's a huge military imbalance, of course, first of all, and also Iran has a sophisticated diplomacy, and they understand the repercussions of whatever actions they take, and any retaliatory action which would aggravate or bring them just head on with Israel in terms of a military confrontation, they understand would not be in their interest and therefore would not be taken by them.
All right.
So what I envisage is a retaliation at some point, but perhaps to a similar tune or a lesser tune to what happened in General Qasem Soleimani's instance.
All right. Also, Jauhar, 33,037 Palestinians have perished, have been killed mercilessly by Israel since the 7th of October. 75,688 at least have been wounded. 62 Palestinians were killed, 91 injured in the past 24 hours alone. In the West Bank, there have been 457 people who've been killed since the 7th, including 110 in the Jenin area. Then, of course, we are hearing every day of bombardments in Rafah, in other parts, in even those camps where the Palestinians are staying. What is Israel's intention? I fail to understand if it is targeting what it says, Palestinian extremists. Is it targeting Palestinian civilians, women and children? Because the most of the casualties are women and children, aren't they?
That's true, and it's such a tragic situation. Over 33,000 have been killed so far, and of course, if we include the numbers of those who are maimed, then that number crosses to more than 100,000. And the conditions there are totally abject. There are no amenities to speak of. There's literally a famine situation. There are no basic amenities. There's sort of no health care to speak of. All hospitals have been destroyed or near destroyed. And it's actually an unprecedented situation and an intolerable situation. And that is why we have seen such a strong reaction all over the world. Even within the US, the pressure is there now on the administration to act. But having stated that, the fact is that Israel has not wavered from its very initial plank or premise, which is that they would want to ensure that Hamas's capability is totally destroyed. Now that objective has not been achieved, and that is why there has been talk of this ground invasion or ground assault on Rafah. And Rafah is the place where we know about 1.4 million Palestinians are now taking refuge. Although it's a very small place. Gaza itself is already a very small piece of land and one of the most densely populated in the world. And on top of that, the whole population has moved from now north to south. Actually, the southernmost point, which is now Rafah, I mean, next to that is just an eye. So that is totally, I mean, it's a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions. And that is why there have been so many endeavors in terms of negotiations, the back-channel diplomacy which is being conducted by the Americans, including the Egyptians, the Qataris, the Jordanians, and of course the Israelis.
But that hasn't led anywhere, has it?
Yeah, there are 3 or 4 tracks going on now. One is what was happening in the UNSC. So we saw that eventually America abstained and a resolution was passed. But then the Israelis claimed, and the Americans also, and others, some other Western countries also claimed that that resolution, which called for a ceasefire, at least for the month of Ramadan, and which called for full resumption of military aid and also for release of hostages, they said that that resolution was not under Chapter 7. It was under Chapter 6. And Chapter 6 is about amicable resolution of disputes. Chapter 7 is where you can have penalties and where you can have sanctions and all. So basically, on that technicality, that resolution has been basically invalidated by the Israelis. Then there was a ruling by the ICJ recently, whereby they said that the aid has to be resumed, right away and sort of without any hindrance. Israelis did not even honor that, and there have been other rulings before that. So that is sort of the track of the international institutions, which are specifically designed to operate in such situations and prevent conflicts, and not only prevent conflicts but also prevent these type of humanitarian
But they haven't been able to prevent neither this conflict nor the humanitarian disaster that has ensued. Now let's also come to the Human Rights Watch that has released a detailed investigation on an Israeli airstrike that had killed 106 Palestinians in a 6-story apartment building on last year 31st of October, and it has described the attack as an apparent war crime. I'd like to add that to what has happened to the World Central Kitchen members, the 7 who've been slain, whose founder says Israel's army systematically destroyed the 3 vehicles carrying 7 aid workers and has demanded nations involved to launch an independent investigation into the killings. The person whose name is Jose Andres says Israel targeted his aid workers systematically, car by car, quote unquote, adding that the Israeli Defense Forces were aware of the convoy's whereabouts. The World Central Kitchen also says the food is being used as a weapon of war. Joe Biden is going to talk to Netanyahu on having a telephonic conversation a bit later in the day. Then the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has said he has expressed his outrage to Israel's defense minister over this killing. Joe Biden says he is outraged and heartbroken by Israel's killing. How do you see all of these statements? Because I fail to understand a lot of things, whether there is a lot of diplomacy within it all, where there's a lot of word mangling in all of it. What is the truth behind all of what is emanating?
You see, there are layers, and within layers, and there's sort of there's a certain facts here which have to be kept in view, and everything has to be built over that. The primary fact is that Israel is probably the closest ally of the US, and and also it is an outpost of Western sort of outpost in the Middle East. So it's a two-way traffic. On top of that, the Israeli influence in the US, and not just the US, in other Western countries. Now this is something which is kind of very clear. There's no ambiguity on that. So all these countries state categorically that the security of Israel is paramount. Now America has also accepted this principle and Israel's position that like Hamas and other organizations who threaten Israel's security in that way, and particularly after the 7th October attack, Israel has full right to go against them, to have military actions, and they support that military action, by the way. There's no ambiguity on that as well. That
is why they continue to supply them with arms.
Exactly, and there's a talk of another $18 billion worth of fighter planes. Okay, so that is clear. They also said there was a question to the US administration representative recently where they said, are there any red lines where America would stop the sort of armament shipments to Israel? And they said no. There's no red lines. So the point is, on the one hand, while Americans are saying that Israel, okay, but at the same time they have been impressing upon Israel that the conduct of this war or this military action should be such that it should limit the civilian casualties.
But they haven't succeeded as yet.
Okay, and exactly, and there have been many instances where that has not happened, and where the Americans have criticized as well than Israelis. But at the same time, we have to remember what they said. There are no red lines. So regardless of what Israelis do, the Americans are not going to stop supporting Israel in terms of providing armaments, in terms of supporting them within the multilateral fora, such as the United Nations, in terms of sort of, by other the diplomacy that they're conducting, which is shuttle diplomacy. Now, there are two other tracks. One is where Americans and Israelis are talking to each other to find if there would be an alternative way to a ground assault on Rafah. Now, this is very important, crucial, because if there's a ground assault on Rafah, then the casualties that we've seen already, they could multiply, and there could be untold suffering.
That is a huge consequence of it all. This is what a lot of people are afraid of.
Exactly. So these negotiations are continuing. The first round took place a few days ago, and in some days from now there'll be a resumption of that dialogue. So that would be important. Now, the second track is where the Americans are conducting a back channel diplomacy, between, and they're trying to indirect talks between Hamas and Israel, and other countries are facilitating that as well, Egyptians, for example, and Qataris. A few times those talks came pretty close to some sort of a fruition, at least in terms of a hiatus or a humanitarian pause in this military action. But that did not succeed on the very question of the release of hostages, like how many of them and when. So I think, but that is continuing as well. So in my view, the best hope for this, this present military action to end, which is creating untold suffering, would be for those negotiations to succeed. That's number one. Secondly, if there's some understanding is arrived between the Israelis and the Americans on the question of any alternative course to this ground invasion or ground assault on Rafah, I think that could be very important as well. And the third is, of course, this pressure that we see coming from the multilateral forums. I see it as a pressure. No resolutions or no condemnations would stop Israel. Because they have a history of disregarding international public opinion. But still, the pressure that is generated, it helps the Americans in their negotiation which they are having with the Israelis, or the negotiations that they're supporting between Israelis and others. So that's how.
What happens then to this charity World Kitchen, whose 7 members have been killed mercilessly, and for whom there is a huge world condemnation that is going on against Israel, because as their head says that the Israeli Defense Forces knew who they were and they deliberately targeted them one by one.
Yeah, and that is exactly why we see that the backdrop of the conversation that is going to take place between President Biden and Netanyahu. I think this is going to be a major topic, and in fact it was only after this that they decided to have this talk. So I think Americans will underline again upon Israelis that look, the world opinion has really shifted, and there is a great need for you to be more cautious, and that could probably help the Americans in the negotiations that they are having with the Israelis on the question of alternative course in terms of their plans for invading, having a ground assault on Rafah.
All right. The US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller says the question of Palestinian statehood needs to be determined by direct negotiation and not at the United Nations. This is in response to a question on whether the US will veto a Palestinian Authority bid for a full UN membership. We all know 140 members of the 193 members have already recognized Palestine as a state, but it needs to be approved by the United Nations Security Council first. And if one of the nations vetoes, then of course this thing is going to fall into limbo. How do you analyze this statement? What is Matthew Miller in fact trying to say? Is he trying to say that Palestine cannot be made a member of the United Nations, we will ensure it through diplomatic means, or B, he's also trying to say that there is no solution to the Palestinian issue until both Palestine and Israel sit together for talks, because he talks of parties concerned. What is he trying to say? Because if he talks of parties concerned, what have those parties concerned achieved? What has Israel been able to do as far as Palestine is concerned, when its main aim is ejecting as many Palestinians as possible from Palestine?
Yeah. Before the inception of this military action by the Israelis, after 7th October attacks by Hamas, there was literally the talk of a two-state solution had faded. You know, the talk of a peace process between Israelis and the Palestinians had again faded. And there was, and instead, we were seeing more and more countries within the region recognizing Israel through Abraham Accords, which was supported by the Trump administration. And of course, you know, it seemed that some sort of rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Israel was on the anvil as well. You know, there was a lot of media stories on that. But this, what has happened in the last 6 months, I think the biggest change that it has brought is that it has brought that the question of Palestine's statehood, the two-state solution, back. And China was the first country which talked about that after this, after the 7th October attacks and Israel's military invasion. But then more and more countries, and then eventually we saw Americans. You know, they're talking about that. There were statements from the Secretary of State Blinken, and then of course at the, you know, by Biden as well. And well, I mean, in itself, it's a positive sign because that issue has come back to the table. Now, what Americans saying, but what, you know, by this Miller's statement suggests is, I think this is a long-standing U.S. policy, which is that this peace process should be conducted through negotiations and not the resolutions, the long-standing UNSC resolutions on Palestine, because which again have suggested a course, right? This is, there's a parallel here to the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, where we have the UNSC resolutions, but where the Americans always and the Western countries generally say that, you know, it should be resolved through bilateral
but
peaceful
just like
negotiations.
Kashmir, Palestine is the same issue. India doesn't want to talk to Pakistan on Kashmir, and Israel doesn't want to properly implement or talk to Palestine on how to move forward as far as the two-state solution is concerned.
And that becomes the biggest stumbling block. And for that, now if the Americans envision to somehow help start this, you know, process or reignite this process through back-channel diplomacy, which, you know, which there might be sort of, you know, like at least in terms of sort of, you know, initial feelers and everything. That, but then again, they have said, and they've used the term, that this will happen in a post-Gaza situation, that once this conflict is over, then the American president, he might take an initiative to launch this peace process again by convincing the Israelis. It will not be easy at all. But you see, why it could happen is, at least there could be an endeavor. And why that could happen is because there's immense pressure on President Biden externally as well, from America's European partners and other, a lot of other partners, particularly in the Middle East, the Muslim countries. And within America itself, because if he has to win the November elections against Trump,
he needs to, you know, be ready to appease the Arab Americans
and the progressives, you know, and the young. And for that, he has to come up with some sort of plank whereby he's seen as being trying to do something. So I think that could be the primary reason for these recent statements.
All right, thank you so very much, Jauhar Saleem Saab, to have come all the way to the studios and to have talked to us, as you always regularly do, about this issue, because the fact is that we don't see a resolution to this long-standing dispute and to this war, this genocide that is going on, which is going to be the biggest strategy of this century, if not previous centuries as well. And that is soon going to surpass the world war if things go the way they are going. Let's hope for some respite. Let's hope for some sanity to prevail before it's way too late. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Let's come to our second story. And our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan, and that has been recently grappling with the profound effects of climate change, which include shifting and unpredictable weather patterns. Devastating floods in 2022, which scientists of course linked to climate change, affected more than 30 million people, also severely impacted the cotton crop that year. The Indus River System Authority has also on Wednesday said that the country is facing a 30% water shortage at the start of the sowing season for cash crops. IRSA says the gap is based on lower than normal water rainfall in the northern areas, which of course they also put to climate change as a reason. The water shortage gap is also expected to narrow as the monsoon rains arrive later in the season, whereas that we will have to see. This said, agriculture is the largest sector of the economy, contributing about 24% of its GDP. And of course, there's an uncertainty about the whole weather pattern also because of climate change. Then tropical forest loss has declined last year, but other indicators show that the world's woodlands still remain under tremendous pressure, according to analysis. Open's new lab released on Thursday by the Global Forest Watch Monitoring Project. And of course, they say that there is a lot more to be done as far as forestation is concerned, and the responsibility of the countries is paramount. Then the vast majority of planet warming carbon dioxide emissions since 2016 can also be traced to a group of 57 fossil fuel and cement producers. This has been unveiled by a group of researchers who also say that it is a joint responsibility of all these nations, of all these organizations, to do the needful. We've been joined by Dr. Syed Muhammad Nasir. He's visiting faculty, Fatima Jinnah Women University, and a former IG Forests, and a very eminent guest as far as environment and climate change and deforestation is concerned. And he's right here with us in the studios. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. Dr. Saab, Pakistan has been grappling with the profound impacts of climate change. We've seen the floods that happened in 22. We have seen all the other effects of climate change as well. We see the increase in temperatures right now as we speak, although the weather becomes a bit kinder with rains, but the increase in temperatures is paramount compared to last year as well. Has the world understood Pakistan's plight? Because despite Pakistan highlighting it at COPs, at Geneva, the aid that needed to come to Pakistan hasn't come as it had been pledged.
Well, the world really realizes it. Everybody agrees that we have to, the science is very clear that we have to minimize the temperature rise to 1.5 by 2030, and then by 2070 a net zero. Otherwise, this is not going to be a sustainable world. They realize it, but the world is probably not, the world economies, major economies, are not ready to do it immediately.
And but why is that in your opinion?
Because over the since the first industrial revolution or the third industrial revolution, the global economy is based on fossil fuels. It was late that everybody realized, and despite that fact that it is a lot of investment is needed to go carbon neutral, whereas the many countries, those who are responsible, are trying to delay it, which appears. But inside, they are all working on renewables for solar and electric cars. They are investing very heavily, and even the biggest oil producers, which are blamed to be the biggest polluters, Saudi Arabians, are investing very heavily on renewables. And it won't be a surprise by 2030 or a little bit later, they would balance their ecological footprints. So for us, it is best not to put all our eggs on these promised aid. It keeps up, pledges keep up coming, and then there are always backtracks. So we have to have a even if all the aid that is pledged, $100 billion per year for all the countries,
the Paris Agreement,
even before that, but what percentage we will be getting will never be $1 billion. So and then when it reaches the real affected people, so the government of Pakistan is already doing some wonderful work and developing their own adaptation plans, having very proactive climate change cells, capacity building programs within the provinces. All the provinces have their provincial red office. There was some delay in reopening the national red plus office. So, things are moving and the things are going for the better. Simultaneously, the problems are also coming up in a bigger way, and we also have now very dynamic government officers in the meteorological department, in the academia. In NAST, I was closely involved with the deployment of artificial intelligence for forest fire prediction, and there we had a deep inside look into global processes and the processes in Pakistan, and the provincial governments are very responsive. They are very much agreeing to accept new ideas. We hope that things will be better.
All right. Now, before we go to forests, I'd like to understand this statement by the Indus River System Authority that says the country is facing a 30% water shortage at the start of the sowing season for the kharif crops. And of course, they need as much of water as possible, like rice, like maize, like sugarcane and cotton are sown in April and require a wet and warm climate, with high levels of rainfall. Do you think this is going to have an impact as far as our crops is concerned? Are there any remedial measures that are available?
There was a similar situation in the mid 2000s, and there were predictions that there will be a crop failure or a wheat shortage due to lesser rainfall. But at the end of the harvest season, we found that we had more wheat crops.
All right.
And the farmers of Pakistan who have evolved, regardless of what the government policies are, they know how to go about it, and they adapt, and they can always design innovative ways, and they do it.
All right. Dr. Saab, do you feel authorities can better plan on how to utilize the water that is allotted to them?
I think you have been doing wonderful thing in highlighting the Recharge Pakistan project, which is originally, in simple words, a flood welcome policy. During the high flood season, we get so much flood that excess water that it drains down the ocean, and then followed by long periods of drought. So the art is to give space to the flood water to on their historical path between the height of the Himalayas and the Arabian Sea, the river systems, and respect the river beds, and we have some good news that the provincial governments are fully involved in that, and let's hope that there will be some good results in recharging the ground aquifers, which is the lifeline of the agricultural economy of Pakistan.
Another very important aspect when it comes to climate change are the forests, whether it be worldwide or in Pakistan as well. And also coming to climate change, I'd like to deviate a little bit and ask something that is also that involves you directly or indirectly. A 3-member bench that was led by Chief Justice Qazi Faiz Isa told the CDA to remove further trees in line with guidelines provided by forest experts, whose assistance was sought at a previous hearing on this very thing. The CDA staff is apparently going to strictly follow their directions, removing the paper mulberry trees from the park. It had also earlier asked important members like yourself, the Supreme Court, for assistance besides restraining further deforestation inside the park, because a lot of people had their doubts about cutting the trees and what impact it's going to have on increasing temperatures and climate change as far as our capital city is concerned. The court has also ordered the Ministry of Climate Change to implement a policy to discourage alien invasive species and circulate the same among the provinces to enable them to enact appropriate legislation if they deem it necessary. My question is twofold. How important is this decision as far as the cutting of the trees is concerned for health purposes, and also to make sure that you don't cut the wrong trees so that the deforestation of Islamabad does not exaggerate? And the second, this implementation of the policy that the Supreme Court has also asked the Ministry of Climate Change to do.
Very lengthy question you have put, which have so many parts. The good thing is that the highest authority in Pakistan has given a landmark decision. This is the first time that alien invasive species have got national importance. And I will start with the last part of your question, that the provincial governments of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan which is Balochistan, some people think this backward province. No, they are very forward looking. In their provincial legislation of wildlife and environmental protection, they have good sections on controlling not only alien invasive species, but also GM crops. But the problem is that the mandate of the wildlife department is limited to wildlife, and alien invasive species is a broader subject which has to be tackled by the pure taxonomists, a rare breed globally and also in Pakistan. Taxonomy is the science of nomenclature, of identification of plants and animals. So, the good thing is that this decision also gives importance to the taxonomists of Pakistan, and we still have some few taxonomists, and the society must respect them, give them honor, and there is no shortcut to pure science, and it's not just because lack of complete knowledge was leading to removing of one type of invasive paper mulberry, but welcoming another type of invasive species like the ipple. So, the good thing is that probably tomorrow or Saturday, the CDA is holding a follow-up meeting to consider the way forward in a sustainable way for both in compliance to the Supreme Court orders for immediate, mid-term and long-term plan for the eradication of all alien invasive species, and it is never going to happen in 1 year, one shot, one activity. It has to be a well planned, scientifically oversight of by scientists or taxonomists and pure ecologists, not half cooked scientists. That is going to happen, and this is a good thing that is happening, and we can foresee that the Ministry of Climate Change shall, once the official verdict of the Supreme Court comes, they will be more proactive and have some legislation, federal as well as provincial, for the control, eradication of the alien invasive species. A good news is in Pakistan, we have some brilliant scientists at KABI like Dr. Babar Bajwa and his team. They have found biological control for the eradication of the carrot grass, the parthenium, the wildflower which is overtaking our ecosystems in northern Pakistan. It is extending, it is taking over our national park, our native flora, and also affecting our fauna. So, the biological control with minimum environment, with no environmental impact is there, and we look forward to working with that brilliant team with foresters who are the practitioners, pure taxonomists, and scientists like applied science like the ones we have. So, it was going to be a collective work, not CDA alone cannot do it.
All right, but what about F9? How long is it going to take? The cutting down of the paper mulberry trees?
They have already started that process under the court orders after thoroughly knowing that paper mulberry causes allergy, and even if it doesn't, it has other negative environmental impacts. It takes over the native flora. And one good thing is that the Supreme Court also mentioned about not planting exotic foreign trees in a specific ecosystem. So, the good thing will be that those trees which have evolved with this climate over time will need less water, no pesticides, less fertilizer, less take care, and will be well suited to our climate.
All right. Final question, Dr. Saab. Deforestation is a global phenomenon, and this region has also seen a lot of it. What should be the measures globally and in the region to take in order to prevent deforestation?
I wish there was someone who had the solution and the carrot and the stick Brazil is a classical example. The previous prime minister was pro deforestation. The present one, President Lula, he ever since he has taken office, the figures have dropped. Deforestation figures have dropped drastically, and the Amazon is the lung of the earth. Whatever happens in Amazon impacts the Sahara Desert, impacts the Russian wildfires. So it impacts something happening in as far as Australia. So as a global citizen, we have to work collectively.
All right, but are you optimistic as far as this working collectively for deforestation, because we see wildfires also, well, like for example in Australia, happening because of the increase in temperatures, coming back to climate change and the effects of it. So it's all a vicious circle basically, Dr. Saab. You need to take care of the forest because the forest will prevent the temperatures from increasing, but then the increase in temperatures also cause wildfires, which comes back and we come back to square one.
Wildfires is quite a complex thing. If you recall a few years back, before it was during the COVID time or even before that, when President Trump was the president of US, and his statement was that he was blaming the US Forest Service for these wildfires, huge wildfires. And that was because of 100 years of overprotection from grazing and ranching. The forest, so much undergrowth came and combustible material accumulated. So we are living in a world with rising population. We have to find a win-win situation where due respect to the processes of nature, natural grazing, we have to follow that removes the ground bush. And if we have experience in Pakistan, where in forests, wherever there is goat grazing by the poor nomadic people, we don't experience too much fires. But where we overprotect, we expect some wildfires. And the extreme case was in the last one was in Balochistan. A huge wildfire came up.
All right. Thank you very much for those eminent, points of views, because I hope that the Supreme Court and other important organizations will continue to take your, points of views on environment, on climate change, because it is with those, interjections that Pakistan will be able to counter climate change, because as you know, and we all know, that Pakistan is one of the most sensitive countries as far as climate change is concerned. Thank you so very much, Dr. Syed Mahmood Nasir Saab, former IG Forests and a huge, environmentalist, to have come all the way to the studios and talk to us about these very, very important points that are affecting Pakistan and the world. Thank you, sir. Kindly stay with us for 5 more minutes as I finish my show. Let's come to our last 2 stories. The first is the 45th death anniversary of former Prime Minister Shaheed Zulfiqaralibhutto. Now, Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif has paid glowing tributes to Shaheed Zulfiqaralibhutto on his 45th death anniversary. In a message, the Prime Minister says Zulfiqaralibhutto played a key role in promoting democracy and democratic traditions in Pakistan. He said it was due to the efforts of Zulfiqaralibhutto that the country adopted a unanimously agreed upon constitution of 1973. He also said the recent judgment of the Supreme Court had endorsed Bhutto's political struggle and said Zulfiqaralibhutto's services for democracy in Pakistan will always be remembered. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, a diabetes drug has come out that has shown promise against Parkinson's in clinical studies. Now, we all know that Parkinson's is a devastating nervous system disorder that affects 10 million people worldwide with no current cure as we speak. Symptoms include rhythmic shaking, slowed movement, impaired speech and problems balancing, which get worse with time. Now, researchers have been interested in exploring a class of drugs which are known as GLP-1 receptor agonists, which mimic a gut hormone and are commonly used to treat diabetes and obesity for their potential to protect neurons. Now, a drug used to treat diabetes has slowed down the progression of motor issues that are associated with the Parkinson's disease. This is all part of a new study that has been published in the New England Journal of Medicine yesterday. A lot of clinical trials are going on with 156 patients with early stage Parkinson's that were recruited across France and then randomly chosen to receive either the drug or a placebo, and the ones with the drug, of course, reacted much better than those. But this is a long way before some kind of actual progress is made, because of course these clinical trials need to continue. But progress has been made, and that we are grateful for. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.